Every second, 8.3 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube. That's 500 hours every minute, or 262,800,000 hours per year. It's such a large amount that if you wanted to watch everything that was uploaded yesterday, and you started the second you were born, you would have to live to be 82, and you could never go to sleep. So the fact that you found yourself watching this video at this very moment is nothing short of a miracle.
At the beginning of the 20th century, movie tickets cost 15 cents, about $1.93 today, and each film took a small army to produce, everyone a salaried employee of the studio, actors, writers, and directors included. The major studios also own the cinemas, giving them perfect vertical integration and full control over the means of distribution to 50 million Americans, nearly half the country, who would go to the cinema every week. Each film represented months and sometimes even years of work. But after the theatrical run concluded, there was no efficient or cost-effective way of distributing them. They'd served their purpose, and without a secondary market, the studios opted to scrap the nitrate films for the silver contained in their coating. Or in the case of the new owners of RKO Pictures, simply throw them into the Santa Monica Bay to save space in a warehouse. Between that and the highly flammable nature of nitrate film stock, which on one occasion destroyed most of 20th Century Fox's archive, it's estimated that only 50% of American films made before 1950 and 90% made before 1929 are lost forever. In the late 30s, the government brought an antitrust lawsuit against the major studios. In 1948, the courts ruled them a monopoly and ordered them to split their production from their distribution. Without owning the entire operation, the studios couldn't afford to keep their stars on contract, and the old way of the Hollywood studio system came to an end. But across the country in New York, something even bigger was about to shake up the entertainment business. The 1939 World's Fair introduced a whole host of new products and inventions. Air conditioning, nylon pantyhose, and the first practical television set. They could only receive a broadcast signal in New York and were prohibitively expensive. But this technology was the future, and by 1949, the television set was affordable enough to sell at a rate of 100,000 units per week. Television had become the new medium, and it connected the rural towns to the big cities and the rest of the world in a way that newspaper and radio could only dream of.
Just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off you.
In the first year after purchasing a television set, the average American's radio listenership declined from 5 hours a day to only 2. What was once America's favorite form of in-home entertainment had been relegated to background noise. All the best comedies and dramas left radio for TV, and radio began to focus on the news.
If you're still watching television on a small screen set, you're missing a lot. Close-ups as large as life with RCA Victor's great new 21-inch model, the Master 21.
But not everyone was crazy about television. Film actors viewed it as a step down, and although movie viewership never recovered to its pre-television heights, it would be another 40 years until they were seen as comparable mediums. However, the top executives were not as hesitant. Paramount Pictures founder and then chairman Adolph Zucker was horrified television would put him out of business, so he began to produce TV. The model had changed from paid movie tickets to advertiser-funded shows, and with TV sets in most homes across America, there was no better way to reach the consumer. Viewers immediately took what they saw on television and incorporated it into their identity. Shows and advertiser slogans became part of the national lexicon. It was responsible for entertaining the masses, electing presidents, and live broadcasting the first man to walk on the moon.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In 1967, entrepreneur and insomniac Ted Turner purchased Channel 17 WTBS in Atlanta. Upon taking control of the network, he asked his employees, "Why are we not on all night? It's a whole part of the day we're not monetizing." And so he made his staff broadcast 24/7. Employees of the station were skeptical, but people tuned in, and their most popular late-night show was a newscast. Eventually, Turner figured out that by using satellite distribution, you could make local cable TV reach a national audience.
We had to go through applications to the government to get permission. That took us about a year, but then we got permission and we did it.
CNN launched in 1980 and brought with it 24/7 news to everyone in America. Prior to this, you had to wait for the evening report, but now it was all playing in real time, and news became sport.
Nothing wrong with going there. It's not illegal. I went down there as a newsman just to find out what was going on.
With the arrival of the 24/7 channel, TV went from entertainment to something we could never look away from. And on August 1st, 1981, in New York City, a brand new TV channel was about to launch, MTV Music Television, an entire station devoted to music videos. And their first video would be this. But only a few years after launch, MTV's viewership was in decline. Market research showed their original fan base had grown up and was no longer interested in endless blocks of music videos. They had to figure out what would bring people back to their channel. And the answer was reality TV. Cheap, easy to make, and never-ending. It catapulted the network to their largest numbers yet. Around the same time, VHS sales were on the rise. The home video market was becoming an increasingly large part of entertainment revenue, and the Writers Guild thought they were being shortchanged by the studios who weren't paying them a percentage of these sales.
Writers say the producers are offering what amounts to a reduction in their fees.
They decided to go on strike, eventually settling with the producers for 0.3% of each tape sold, a low number justified by the high production costs and risks associated with expensive VHS tapes. By this point, almost everyone had a VCR at home, but tapes could cost up to $100, so it was hard to have them all. David Cook and his then-wife Sandy frequently rented them from their local video store. One day while roaming the aisles, they saw an opportunity. If small shops were successful, a superstore with a much bigger selection would do even better. So they leased a retail space and opened the very first Blockbuster.
Imagine the perfect video store. It would have a great selection, right? Right! Over 10,000 videos.
Welcome to Blockbuster Video.
One year later, in 1987, Cook sold the business for $18.5 million. Its new owners aggressively expanded to over 400 stores in less than a year, before being bought by Viacom, who oversaw the switch to DVDs.
This is DVD.
By the early 2000s, Blockbuster was valued at nearly $5 billion and attracted big investors like legendary corporate raider Carl Icahn.
Part of my values is to make money, and I can't change my values. I mean, some people love art, so, love to paint. If a great painter loves to paint, well, you can't, what do? Criticize him because he likes to paint?
When the first television set was introduced in the late 1930s, it cost $200. At the time, 1/5 of the average American's annual salary. But by 1986, 98.4% of American homes had a TV set. And on July 23rd of that same year, North Carolina's WRAL became the first station to broadcast an HD signal. In-home entertainment had gone from barely recognizable black and white to lifelike and full color.
This set switches the channel to a new era.
It's a high-resolution format. It's one much more looking like film. Some people have described it as looking out of a window.
Now with the ability for their work to be recognized in all its glory, Hollywood took note. And in the next decade, Some of the best actors, writers, and directors would create a new golden age of television.
Daydream, I fell asleep amid the flowers for a couple of hours on a beautiful day.
So what, no fucking ZD now?
Daydream, I dream of you amid the flowers for a couple of hours. Such a beautiful day. I dreamed of a place.
In San Francisco, a new startup was losing millions of dollars each month. And in a last-ditch effort to save the company, its CEO spent $20,000 they didn't have on flights to an emergency meeting with a potential buyer. He said, "We're on track to lose almost $50 million this year. Whether we pull this off or not, 20 grand won't make a difference." That CEO was Reed Hastings, and the company on the brink of collapse was Netflix. The next morning, he flew to Dallas for a meeting with Blockbuster. He offered to sell them Netflix for $50 million, but they turned him down. A few years later, Blockbuster would see the writing on the wall and try their hand at Netflix's business strategy of mail-in DVDs and online streaming. In less than a year, Blockbuster gained 2 million users that would have otherwise gone to Netflix. But their core in-store rental business was in decline, and investors failed to see how their new strategy would solve the company's growing debt problem. Carl Icahn was now the largest shareholder. He stepped in, closing the mail-in DVD business, forcing Blockbuster to stick to its roots. Icahn would later call Blockbuster the worst investment of his career. Back in Hollywood, the writers felt like they were being shortchanged again. Home video sales for the first quarter of 2004 were 3 times greater than box office revenue. Resentment was growing, and in 2007, their union contract was up for renegotiation.
We're not asking for very much. I mean, they want 4 extra cents a DVD, and they want 2.5% of whatever they make for profits for internet.
They would go on to strike for 100 days, but in that time, a major shift was taking place. Without anyone to write the scripted shows, the networks were forced to fill their schedules with something else: reality TV. Over the next year, 100 new unscripted shows would debut or return. And while the writers negotiated a deal that would give them a larger percentage and force streaming services to hire them, they came back to a whole new world. Reality TV was getting higher ratings. People were tired of repetitive sitcoms and predictable dramas. America fell in love with reality TV, and a whole generation of people grew up watching it.
Victor lives on cheeseburgers and cheeseburgers alone.
I love burgers.
In 1996, PhD students Larry Page and Sergey Brin began a research project to rank sites on the internet based on how important they were. This project would become Google, but now they were a business. They needed to please their investors, and their solution was to sell ads. In 2000, they would launch their ads business. It would carry them through the tech bubble and bring monetization to people all around the world. For the last half-century, technology progressed at a rate that allowed almost anyone to have the means of production. And now, thanks to platforms like YouTube, distribution.
Alright, so here we are, one of the elephants. And the cool thing about these guys is
the millennial generation was born at a strange time, the last to know the old world and the first to embrace the new one. They would graduate college into the poor job market of the Great Recession and become stuck in a loop of entry-level positions. They had done everything as they were told, and they had been failed by the system. But the internet and social media presented them with an opportunity. They could post their way out of their problems. And thus began an era of millions of simultaneous heroes' journeys, everyone telling their story. It was the first tech-savvy generation's way to try and reconcile with the constantly evolving world around them. They developed their own unique style of media. New companies popped up left and right. And the online personality became a celebrity. But due to their intimate nature, people began to view these internet personalities as more than just performers. They saw them as their friends, and they respected their opinion. Before long, advertisers caught on, and the old way of large productions and expensive television spots made way for the influencer. Cheaper and more effective.
If you click on the link and become a VIP member, you get a discount on your purchase.
Brands could get their products closer to a viewer's face than even television could, and these internet stars sold product better than anyone else. The 2002 sci-fi action film Minority Report features a dystopian world where everyone has their own targeted ads on every billboard. Thanks to sponsored content, people had become billboards. Home videos became a direct-to-consumer sales pitch. And not only were they using their audience to sell ads, but they were openly talking about exactly how much they were making from people watching them read ads. According to a Bloomberg study, 98% of middle and high school students wanted to be influencers. It didn't matter what you were making. It didn't matter what you were saying. If you simply put yourself out there, people would watch, and you would become famous. Accessibility to a large audience has weakened the correlation of talent and notoriety. Gen Z grew up on the internet. It was their world, and certain people had figured out how to use psychological tactics to manipulate your brain. With brighter colors, faster cuts, and a never-ending stream of on-screen text, they made it progressively harder to click away.
We have a real tank, an entire carnival. I'm blowing up a bank.
You want to watch this video?
In July 2022, Warner Bros. HBO merged with Discovery and began to remove titles for tax write-off. Projects thousands of people had spent years of their lives working on, removed from the internet because they were trying to make their numbers look better. The average American under 25 now consumes less than an hour of TV per day, and when they're watching TV, there's an 85% chance they're also using a mobile device. Video didn't kill radio, it became radio. Nearly half of all Americans spend more than 5 hours a day on their phones. 20% of Gen Z spends more than 4 hours on TikTok alone. They may be consuming more individual pieces of media than ever before, but they're spending the exact same amount of time engaged as people in the 30s who listen to radio, and people in the 50s who watch TV. Infinite scroll applications are able to hold our attentions better than anything else. Viewers may be responding to texts or surfing the web while watching television, but they aren't multitasking while using an infinite scroll app. It's easy to look at phone use and think it's just mindless. But people are curious, and they're looking for something they might enjoy. Our mobile devices have our attention, and it's only a matter of time before all the best entertainment is vertical and available for free to anyone with an internet connection. The Spielbergs, Hitchcocks, and Scorseses of tomorrow will be making their masterpieces in the same way we are. Content creators can try appealing to the algorithm and use tactics to keep people from clicking away, but ultimately, they will be forgotten.
If you were to map the history of the universe on a single year, humans would not show up until the final second of the final hour of December 31st. And in that second, 8.3 hours of video was uploaded to YouTube.